Hello, people of grace. This upcoming Sunday is Advent Sunday number 2, focusing on the love of God in Christ as we approach Christmas and his first Advent celebration. So, for our Pastoral Connect today, we're going to talk about love, but in the context of narratives. And narratives have subjects and objects. Um, that's just kind of the grammar of language, and I would say the grammar of being. So, as we talk about the love of Christ, I want to start with a statement that Paul makes in Galatians, where he says, the love of Christ constrains him. And we can look at that as this external love to Paul that puts outward constraints on him. So, Paul is the object. But it can also just as easily be understood, and I think overall in the context of Paul's emphasis on grace, intrinsically with Paul as the subject saying, my love of Jesus constrains me. It's not some outward constraint put on, but rather this powerful love, grace, energy that just is a positive direction in Paul's life where he's just not going to do certain unloving things. But it's not actually a limit on his freedom. It's what demonstrates that he's becoming increasingly free. So that's subject. And as you look at it that way, though we can't prove whether Paul means that term objectively or subjectively, that love constrains, um, I think the way you tend to take it says something about our own narratives. Specifically, what stops our ability to love? Is it something um, out there, like people oppressing me, or is it something internal? What stops us? What most oppresses us? And I think Jesus answers that question without dismissing any kind of oppression that happens. Jesus, living in an occupied country, says um, oh, that whoever sins is a slave to sin, even though the Romans are occupying our country. And so we have this big call for freedom. Jesus says the thing that most stops you from being free is your own sin. The thing that most oppresses me is my inability to love and to really experience and walk in the grace and the love and the forgiveness, unconditional, that is the I am, the ground of all being. Well, how does that play out in my soul, my unseen soul? This is where we get to the power of the Word. Um, John has that inspired, truly insight that Christ is the Word of the Father. And we have a word within us because we're made in God's image. Our heart generates our word in a similar way as the Father generates the Son or the Word. So our heart, the core of our being, generates our word or our narrative. And so we really need to be waging a grace-based fight to not just claim our rightful territory, but claim the territory in our souls, in our heads. That makes it more aligned with God's narrative. So my challenge in this Advent season is, does your heart believe, as John came to believe, and he wrote later in his life in 1 John, that in Christ the darkness is already passing and the true light is already shining? That's what sets us free to love. That needs to be our baseline, the floor of our soul, our foundation, is that love has won in Christ, and that really love is about me sending love out unconditionally, even to my enemies. Not only is that what breaks the kind of basic principles of this world, it's what sets me free from what most oppresses me, which is my own sin. So work on your narrative, because how we tend to talk about things, how it leaks out of us both non-verbally and verbally, gives us an insight into the battle our soul is fighting. And when we direct our energy there, we're directing it in the one place where it can make the biggest difference, our own hearts. So let's win the battle for our hearts. We can in Christ. The darkness is passing. The thing that most oppresses us, our sin, is already passing. The true light is already shining. And that's an encouraging Advent thought. Have a blessed day.